Ever since the announcement of the Marvel vs. Capcom collection, there's been a lot of talk about the possibility of a proper Marvel vs. Capcom 4. It became a trend for people to make and post their dream roster if Marvel 4 is to happen. I also participated in this trend. But now that some time has passed, I look back at my dream roster and I realize there's no way this would ever happen. In fact, what would a realistic character roster look like for Marvel vs. Capcom 4? When building a roster for a game like Marvel vs. Capcom, you need to keep in mind about the fans. We have comic book Marvel fans, MCU fans, those who grew up with Capcom arcade games, and this newer age of Capcom fans playing their home console games. You need to make a roster that appeals to both the old and new generations. And the best case scenario is that your players will take interest in the other characters that they've never interacted with before. A Spider-Man fan who becomes curious about the Devil May Cry series. A Resident Evil enthusiast who becomes invested in the strange tales of Doctor Strange. An old-school X-Men fan who purchases Monster Hunter World, who may also end up purchasing the upcoming Monster Hunter Wilds. But you cannot guarantee that all these scenarios may happen. You can't even guarantee that everyone will be happy with your final roster. That's part of the challenge when making a character roster for any fighting game. But somebody on that dev team needs to do it. With all that out of the way, here is a realistic and plausible character roster for Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Alright, got everything set up. I got 2 brackets filled with returnees and possible newcomers. So at the very top here, I have who I consider to be like core or essential for a Marvel vs. Capcom roster. It's not Marvel vs. Capcom without these particular characters. And plus, some characters like Morgan and Strider, they pretty much only ever exist in Marvel vs. Capcom. Seeing how Marvel vs. Capcom started with technically X-Men vs. Street Fighter, let's go ahead and get started with the X-Men characters. Alright, here we go. Let's start off who I think is definitely going to get in, Cyclops and Magneto. Cyclops has always had he was essentially one of the 2 mascots next to Ryu with the Marvel series, so it makes sense to bring him back. And Magneto is just a reoccurring villain for the Marvel series, or at least not as a story villain, but more so as a representative of the villain side of the Marvel vs. Capcom series. So Iceman, Cable, even Emma Frost are kind of big question marks for me because X-Men's got a lot of notable characters. And because I want to keep this as 20 characters for each side, 20 Marvel, 20 Capcom, for a base roster of 40 total, I don't want to shove too many X-Men into the core starting roster. So a lot of these characters are going to have to be cut. Alright, here we go. So these are going to be here are some possible candidates we could see returning. Gambit's just a fan favorite, one of my personal favorites. I would definitely want him in the roster. But again, I'm only limiting myself to 20 slots for each side. I think Storm has, sort of like Gambit, has the whole legacy thing going on. Well, especially with how insanely busted she was in Marvel 2. Not that I want Marvel 2 Storm back I think just that notoriety is kind of a reason why some people would just want Storm back. Psylocke is a personal pick of mine, and then Sentinel. I think Sentinel would get in just to possibly fill out the villain category, but also the big body, burly kind of characters, similar to like Hagar, Zangief, and Hulk. So as for everyone else, Phoenix, Jean Grey. I do like Phoenix. Jean Grey as a character, more so narratively. I think the existence of Dark Phoenix, I think how it was implemented is fine, but just Dark Phoenix's existence is what makes her a bit of a balanced nightmare. And I think for that sake, it would be healthier if Jean Grey did not return. And Firestar, who I think is an underrated character. It's a personal pick for me. In fact, she's probably one of the few characters that's like both X-Men and Avenger. I think the only issue, there's two issues with Firestar. Number one, I think, is that she's too similar to Jean Grey, and on the surface at least, where it's just red-headed lady with fire powers. And then the second reason being that she is far too obscure. I would say she's on a similar level to like maybe like Ed Falcon. Like, I don't think there's a whole, this is not a mainstream character. I don't think the average person knows who this person is. I think my worry for Bishop is that they might unintentionally make him too similar to Cable. Just big dude with guns. Magic and Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler, I'm surprised, has not been in any of these games yet. It's a fan favorite, highly requested character. Magic. As much as I think it'd be nice to see Magic, I think the only thing holding back Magic is the fact that the X-Men side of the roster is already very competitive. So with that being said, I think Magic, Cable, Bishop, Iceman, Emma, Jean Grey, and Firestar are going to be down and out. Now switch to the Capcom side with the Street Fighter characters. Alright, here are Street Fighter characters. I think if we absolutely need a third slot, I think Akuma is like the ideal choice. In fact, I'm pretty sure Marvel Infinite's like the only one where he does not appear in, surprisingly. Alright, so everyone else here. So I think the problem with Cammy, Zangief, Bison, and Ken is the fact that I'm very sure Capcom would want to advertise this newer age of Street Fighter. With Juri. Juri was introduced in, I'm pretty sure it was Street Fighter 4, but I don't think she got her popularity until Street Fighter 5. Luke is essentially the face of Street Fighter 6, and Rashid was introduced in Street Fighter 5, but was popular enough to come back in Street Fighter 6. So I think Ken is not going to make the cut. The difficult thing with his Zangief is that I think when it comes to the big hulking characters, he's also competing with that spot with, I mean, maybe not necessarily Sentinel, but definitely Hagar. And Hagar, I think Hagar is the only Final Fight representative we have ever gotten in the MVC series. And I can see Capcom bringing back Hagar just because, hey, they already did the work for Marvel 3 and Infinite. They can just do it again. Easy peasy. Whereas Zangief has never been in a Marvel game since Marvel 2. So he would be built from the ground up. So just because of that possibility, Zangief may not make the cut. Yeah, as much as I want Cammy, realistically, I think Cammy and even Bison are going to lose a spot to these newer age Street Fighter characters. And out of these three, I think Luke is going to make it just because he is the face of Street Fighter 6, and there's kind of a question of, is he going to be the mascot for this new era? Like the mascot of this entire new generation of Street Fighter. Whereas Street Fighters 1 through 5, it was definitely Ryu. Well, Street Fighter 6 through 10 will now be Luke. And it might be. There might be a possibility for maybe one of these characters to become DLC. So, back to the Marvel side, who do we got? Let's go with the Guardians of the Galaxy. So Star-Lord is a very popular, highly requested character, but I can see Star-Lord still losing out to Rocket and Gamora just because Capcom's already done the work for these characters before. But the thing is, would both of them make it to the main roster? That's the part I really don't know. I think Gamora gets in. Groot, let's leave in the maybe category. Back to Capcom, let's move on to Devil May Cry. Alright, so Dante's getting in, no question about it. As for Trish, I'll be honest, I sometimes forget that Trish even exists in Marvel 3, and I think that's because when it comes to the Devil May Cry characters, yeah, we got Virgil, Nero, V, you even have Lady, who I think just stand out more. If there's a newcomer that's gonna get in, it should be Nero. I would be very surprised if he did not. Virgil has pretty much lived almost his whole life as DLC, being DLC for Devil May Cry 4, Devil May Cry 5, and the not DLC that was Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the Ultimate. And just because we already have three Devil May Cry representatives, I don't see the need for V to be in the overall roster. Okay, let's move on to Fantastic Four. So Fantastic Four has always been a weird one, because when it comes to the, four main Fantastic Four characters, Johnny, Reed, Sue, and Thing, can you have just one of them? Or do you absolutely need all four? And the general consensus is that if you're going to have only one Fantastic Four character, it might just be Johnny. And I think there was the attempt back in Marvel 3 with Super Skrull, because Super Skrull was essentially just all four of the Fantastic Four mixed into one character. And well, Skrull's just not that interesting, let's be honest. And then Doctor Doom. Okay, so Doctor Doom's absolutely getting in. He's not just a staple for the Marvel series, but specifically as of this year, 2024. This is the year of Doctor Doom. We got the announcement of Doctor Doom coming to the MCU. Doctor Doom is the main villain for Chapter 5, Season 4 of Fortnite. And in the upcoming Marvel Rivals game, seems like Doctor Doom is the main narrative force behind the story of that game. So going back to Capcom, let's look at the Mega Man characters. Okay, so I should mention that for X and Mega Man, I'm perfectly fine with one of them being in the initial roster. I can see maybe one of them even being a DLC character. So with that being said, I think Mega Man is going to go in the maybe category, possibly as a DLC. Back on my initial dream roster, I had Spider from Mega Man Command Mission, Spider is not only just a niche character, but he's the closest thing that Capcom would have to Gambit, assuming that Gambit does not make it into the roster. But Spider's nowhere in here, so I can add him to this whole list, and honestly, that's fine. Spider is way too niche to be anywhere in here. I think people are more familiar with Axel over Spider. Trombone does have the legacy advantage, seeing how she was both in Marvel 2 and 3, but I think just for general consensus, people are more familiar with Proto Man over Tron and Axel. So let's put Proto Man in the maybe category. Oh, no, Dormammu. Oh, I completely forgot about Rogue. I already have 5 X-Men characters in here. Do I really want to add a 6th? Damn. I feel like you can have Gambit without Rogue, but you cannot have Rogue without Gambit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being weird. Sorry, Rogue. You don't make it. Alright, let's go on to the Spider-Man characters. My initial worry for Gwen and Miles is that they're just going to be a clone of Peter Parker. And this ain't Smash Bros. We're not doing Echo characters, or Echo fighters. I think Miles has enough going on to where he can possibly make the roster. I forgot about Doc Ock too. Doc Ock is also a highly requested character. I'm not on board with this. I'm not on board with this pick purely because I think this is too much work for a 2D fighter. Because keep in mind, he's got 4 mechanical arms, and he sometimes walks around on them. I think if Marvel was more like a 3D fighter, like Tekken or something, I think Doc Ock would be a pretty good choice. But for a 2.5D fighter, like Marvel, nah. I can see this being maybe a bit of a development nightmare. So Green Goblin, I'm only going to say no to Green Goblin just because I think these characters are more interesting. So Gwen could get in, because Gwen and Miles are actually popular now. These last two, which are my personal picks, Black Cat and Carnage, I feel like this is more specifically appealing to the more so Marvel diehards. Because as of right now, like any random person on the street, they've likely seen Miles and Gwen, and that's because of the success of the Spider-Verse movies. Whereas compared to that, Felicia and Carnage are a bit more niche. I personally want Felicia in the roster, but I can see the possibility of her not making it in. Carnage, I think Carnage would be a good DLC choice. Actually, Miles would be good DLCs. I think, let's say 2-3 months later after the launch of Marvel 4, we finally get our first confirmation of DLC characters. I think immediately starting with Virgil and Miles is already setting the bar. These two characters would immediately get people to pull out their wallets. Okay, so Resident Evil. Okay, probably the most requested character, Leon. I don't understand why they still haven't done it. We kept getting Chris, but nah, we all want Leon. And as for RE villains, I personally prefer Wesker. Nemesis, could Nemesis get in? Just to fulfill the big behemoth giant characters. Maybe. Jill's a bit of a weird one, because I personally would want them to go back to Marvel 2 Jill, where she's just throwing zombies at people, but I wouldn't be surprised if Capcom would rather go back to her Marvel 3 iteration, which I believe was based off of RE5. So there could be some conflicts there with fan expectations and demand, and also what's easier for the sake of production. Okay, Lady D. I don't see Lady D as a fighting game character. I really don't. Ada. Okay, so Ada is in a category with like Cammy and Jury where, hey, let's add a really attractive female character to sell DLC. I feel like that argument's only going to go far for so long. But I think out of a lot of these characters, it's Ada who's actually gonna pull that off. Oh, I also forgot about Venom. Yeah, Venom's getting in. Alright, let's go with the twins. Scarlet and Quicksilver. Scarlet Witch is a highly requested character. And it's a pick for me as well. I'm not sure if she's core roster material or DLC. I think Scarlet has a better chance over Gwen and Black Cat, honestly. We'll put her in the maybe. Quicksilver. I think Quicksilver's only not getting in because, again, we have far too many X-Men characters or candidates to potentially get into this game. So, nah, sorry Quicksilver. Alright, Darkstalkers. Okay, Felicia and Hashinko I don't think are all that interesting. And during my short time playing Darkstalkers 3, I really like John Talbane. I can understand why there's demand for this character. Jetta's cool. He might come back just because they made the character in Infinite. They have a base to work with, again, for a proper Marvel 4. BB Hood is a character I would want to return, but realistically, I don't think she will. Okay. The remaining Marvel returnees. Captain Marvel. This is a weird one, because my understanding is that not even Marvel themselves know what to do with Captain Marvel. Apparently her comics have never been that great, and the character writing has been inconsistent. I wouldn't know. I never read any of her comics, and I didn't even watch the movie, which I don't know if the reception of the Captain Marvel movie would be enough for them to not consider Carol. Because I do feel like Captain Marvel only got into Infinite just to advertise her movie for the MCU. Deadpool. Why would Deadpool not return? Even back in Marvel 3, before we had any of the Deadpool movies, he was already a very well-received character. And flash forward to right now, he's had 3 movies and they've all been very well received. I don't understand why you would not put Deadpool in. Doctor Strange and Dormammu. Yes, absolutely. Hawkeye. Hawkeye is an interesting one, because I can see him returning, but I also just look at everything else and I just think they're better candidates. Thanos is definitely getting in, especially after portrayal in the MCU. Black Panther, absolutely getting in. So out of these last 4, Nova, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Ultron, I can see maybe Nova getting back in. I thought Nova was completely fine in Marvel 3 and Infinite. I'm just very surprised that Nova has not gotten a movie yet. Although I'm pretty sure Nova has appeared in all the kids' cartoons and other Marvel video games. So there's that audience who's already familiar with Nova. And plus I can see Nova maybe coming back when they want to confirm that, yeah, Nova is getting his own movie for the MCU. So what are we at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Damn, 17. 17 of the Marvel slots are returnees. And that's the difficult thing with making a roster like this. You need to find a balance between returning characters and brand new characters. Because you can't just make all the new characters DLC. You know what, we got 3 slots. Let's finish out the Marvel roster. Blade is a highly requested character, and it makes sense. He fits a action-packed game like Marvel. I'm surprised he didn't even get into Infinite, 3 or Infinite. It's very surprising. Loki, I think, is going to get in, especially Especially, they can get pretty creative with all the voice lines with Thor. Our final slot. I think Adam Warlock could get in. I think Adam Warlock's gonna get in because, like, maybe Daredevil and Punisher, maybe even Moon Knight. I think these are 3 good candidates for possible DLC. Back to the Capcom side, given the popularity of Monster Hunter, I think Monster Hunter is gonna get in. I think Phoenix Wright could get in, just to fulfill the weird wild card gimmicky kind of playstyle that he provides. Amaterasu and Beautiful Joe are going to get in because their series have been neglected, and the only time they ever appear in anything anymore is in Marvel vs. Capcom. So this means I have 2 slots for brand new characters. This is actually a tough one. I know I want Asura in. I just don't know if I want him as DLC or core roster. I'm thinking of it. At EVO, they announced the DLC character, which is gonna get the crowd riled up, jumping out of their seats. Would it be Asura, Ed, Roy, Regina, Akira? I think Regina could get in as DLC. Especially since that Capcom survey, all the Dino Crisis fans came out. They made their voices known. The more I think about it, I think Asura can make it into the base roster. And you know what? I can see Capcom taking the shortcut. Hagar makes it to the core roster. So as for possible DLCs, okay, so we have a core roster of 40 characters, 20 for each Marvel and Capcom, and we got a very lengthy list of possible DLC candidates. I'm gonna say let's limit it to 10 characters. So our first 2 characters will be Virgil and Miles. After that, we will say Ada. Let's say Ada and Gambit. Actually, Gambit or Storm? Oh. Honestly, as much as I want Gambit in, I think Storm has a better chance of making it in. So then our next Marvel represent. I can see Nightcrawler being a DLC character. But so, same for Psylocke and Gambit. Maybe I'm just being a bit of an X-Men fanboy. Because I don't want to flood the roster with X-Men characters. Although it does make sense. Because the whole series started with X-Men vs. Street Fighter. I'm going to say, let's put in Punisher. Absolutely, let's put in Punisher. That'll get the crowd going. Our next Capcom DLC character. Would it be Jury or Proto Man? Actually, you know what? Let's put in Ed to appeal to the old school Capcom fans, representation for Power Stone, and then we can end off the DLC with. I think we can end it off with Proto Man or X. I'm gonna say let's end it off with Proto Man. And let's get Johnny in here. Our final Marvel DLC. I can see it being Carnage or Daredevil. I'm honestly leaning towards Carnage. So there is a roster of now 50 characters. And assuming that this game does well, I can see maybe we can get a second wave of DLC. And how do we want to start off DLC 2? Start off with Gambit. Gambit and Jury. After that, I think we can add Daredevil. Daredevil, and let's get Akira in here. Let's see. Okay, Roy or Akira for our rival schools represent. I think Akira would get in because of her appearance in Street Fighter V. Then I'll say Scarlet Witch. And after that, alright, we already got Jury. Sorry Rashid, sorry Cammy. I can see a possible scenario of Ryu from Breath of Fire being added. Or would Capcom would want to avoid the Ryu confusion? Especially when talking about online discussions. Oh hey, which Ryu are you talking about? But then again, that seems so minor in the grand scheme of everything. The more I think about it, I'm leaning towards Ryu. Okay, so Marvel candidate number 4 for DLC 2. Nightcrawler, Psylocke, or Black Cat. I personally would want Psylocke, but I think Nightcrawler is the more hyped character. I can see Capcom maybe doing a throwback, re-adding Ruby Heart. Okay, now we are in a difficult position. How do you want to end the DLC? It needs to end off a good note. It needs to end with a bang. Kind of like when they announced Sora for Smash Ultimate. I think for the Capcom side, X would be a better final edition compared to Nemesis. And then for the Marvel side, shoot, and this is a tough one. Alright, assuming the year is like 2028 or something, who knows, maybe Captain Marvel gets a good movie, or gets a good TV show or something, and that popularity would be enough reason to bring her back. But as of right now, I can see it being Rocket. Although, I have to ask myself, for the Marvel category, would that be ending things off with a bang? I think X-Men fans and Marvel 2 diehards would be probably the only ones losing their minds if Psylocke came back, or was the final edition. Black Cat, I think, is a bit too niche. So what if our final DLC for the Marvel side, should it be Nightcrawler or Daredevil? I'm gonna say, let's bring in Rocket over here, so that way we don't have 2 back-to-back X-Men characters. We'll bring Nightcrawler over here, and we'll end things off with X and Daredevil. I think this is a good way to end things off.